This is all about ideology.
They're in the business to make money. They're in the business to ingratiate themselves with the masses out there. But as a black man, recognizing what...
As a black man. Somebody told Stephen A. Smith that he's intelligent enough to speak for so-called black men.
What's transpiring and seeing the way folks end up looking like puppets from time to time.
Yes, it takes one to know one.
Just gravitate into stuff like this and willingness, such an eagerness and a willingness to attach themselves to a particular narrative. I'm not falling for that. Hold on.
Well, you know what? Good for you, Stephen A. Smith. Even though I get on this brother a lot, his takes, his observations on the Kaepernick storyline are starting to become a bit more enlightened. So good for him.
Nike has been relatively silent on the issue involving Colin Kaepernick as it pertains to marketing him for the last 2 years.
That's right. I'm not... Listen, right. A business, talking about the morality or the point of view philosophically of a business is kind of ridiculous, because a business is trying to make money. That's what it's trying to do. But let me just say that Muhammad...
That's very true. Businesses, their sole purpose is to make money. But when you're talking about a mega corporation like Nike, what is their observation? What is their prognostication in regards to how much money they think that they're going to make with Colin Kaepernick? Why would it be worth their time to come out from behind the shadows and co-sign Colin Kaepernick unless they had other motivations? Because you can't tell me that it's just about money.
Muhammad Ali, Tommy Smith, you talk about any social justice warrior in the sporting landscape in our country, always was met with opposition, especially at first, especially by people who claimed it was on the grounds of patriotism or some sort of weird idea of freedom.
Well, let's understand something first off. John Carlos and Tommy Smith, they were both Marxists. And in regards to Muhammad Ali, at least the backbone of his statements, his assertions, his observations came from the Nation of Islam. And that's why I always give Ali more credit, because he actually attempted to be a part of a solution and not just be a quote-unquote protester, a so-called activist, basically just an empty-headed loudmouth for his whole life. Now, whether or not Ali's allegiances were as good as they needed to be, that's a whole other conversation, but at least he showed consistency. When we're talking about Tommy Smith and John Carlos and Colin Kaepernick, they were just socialist / Marxist pawns. That's it.
Freedom, and until the tide turned, corporate money usually wasn't behind them. Once the tide turned, then the corporate money came behind them.
And that's what Stephen A's highlighting.
Right, but what is that tide comprised of, Max Kellerman? Is that tide comprised of a sentiment that's not based in a particular agenda? What is the agenda behind Nike or the mega corporation suddenly getting behind so-called wokeism or quote-unquote black activism? What is the horse in the race that they have? It's very obvious to me that they're ready to get in bed with so-called black activists, because these so-called black activists have been compromised behind the scenes and they're actually assets / pawns. And maybe Tommy Smith and John Carlos were not as directly related to the overall agenda back then as Colin Kaepernick is right now. We're 50 years down the line, and Colin Kaepernick is still trying to use the same tactics as John Carlos. Why is that? Shouldn't we have moved forward in our understanding of how to engage with the quote-unquote enemy, if that's how we want to view it? Brothers already know my platform. We have to first off, we have to take back control over ourselves and over our household. We have to start there, because really the so-called black man is supposed to have his own police force. That's always been my platform. Other races should not be policing the so-called black man. When it comes to his communities, we're not supposed to be servicing many of these businesses that are waxing fat off of our people. We have to start to understand economic warfare, but before we can do that, we have to have a greater understanding of our culture and what it is. So-called black man has to put the Most High first and stop looking for validation from the other races and from his woman. These are all major problems.
highlighting, and look at the two notes I have right here. Nike, right side of history, a little late. So on the same page with both of you, but I do want to spin it forward because being aligned with Nike, being part of this campaign, Stephen A., does this actually help or hurt Kaepernick's message? We know it's helping Nike.
It's going to help Nike. I don't know if it's going to help Colin Kaepernick. I think it's...
No, it's going to help Colin Kaepernick because it's going to keep him in the limelight. He needs money at the end of the day. And he's been getting checks from a lot of sponsors behind the scenes. I made a video a long time ago where I stated it was revealed, it was brought out. I'm trying to remember what news outlet it was. I think it was TMZ, that he had been approached and subsidized to get involved in that situation over in Somalia. I'm not sure if you guys remember that when Kaepernick first came out as the pseudo-revolutionary. He started to get involved with the situation in Somalia, and I believe that it was Ben Stiller and his corporation that was sponsoring Kaepernick. Once again, behind the liberal blacks are always the liberal Caucasian, especially the liberal Caucasian Jew.
I think it's time to really get down to the nuts and bolts about this. You're talking about bringing attention to oppression, police brutality, racial inequality. What black man on this earth would have a problem with that position? Of course we don't have a problem with that position with Colin Kaepernick. Of course we applaud, his willingness to take a knee and bring attention to it. And personally speaking, I'm grateful for it.
Well, I can't state that I'm grateful for a gesture. I have to understand what your motivation is. I have to understand what your end game is. You can claim that you want to end world hunger, but if your idea of ending world hunger is to stand out in the middle of the street and stop traffic until world hunger is over, I'm sorry, I can't co-sign that. Now, if you're able to write down a plan where step by step you want to end world hunger, then I can respect that. I might not agree, but I can respect that. I can never respect a nigga getting down on one knee, begging a white man to notice him. And a lot of so-called pro-blackity blacks get upset by that. I don't give a shit. How are you trying to restore any type of respect for yourself by getting down on one knee?
But the reality is that that's not all there is to this Colin Kaepernick story. Yes, you have a collusion case against the National Football League. Yes, you had a court ruling just the other day that's going to facilitate you, really taking this to trial potentially. Let's not get into the issue of a summary judgment. He's granted that, and he has had an opportunity to get access to text messages that have been bandied about by NFL owners. Oh, there could be major trouble down the line. Make no mistake about that. But
if you're the NFL right now, you have to be very, very concerned that with Nike behind Colin Kaepernick, that is going to exponentially boost his chances of winning this court case. Because as we know, money talks. And Nike can put some money in certain people's accounts.
But let's also recognize the fact that, we've gone about the business of martyring Colin Kaepernick to such a degree that we've turned a blind eye and a deaf ear to what the hell was going on a football field. Colin Kaepernick got beat out of a quarterback job by Blaine Gabbert.
Thank you, sir. Not only did he get beat out by Blaine Gabbert, he got beat twice. Let me find out Stephen A. Smith been coming on my channel.
Let's remember that, number one. Number two, completed 59.8% of his passes. Number three, the last 2 years that he was a quarterback in the National Football League, his record was 3-16 as a starter. Yeah. 3-16. Now, we come to his defense because we see other people in the NFL who has jobs, and we know they're not better than Colin Kaepernick.
We knew he could be a starter, but a backup he could be.
He could have been a backup. Hell, he could have been a starter for some teams for all we know. But
you know what that is, brothers? That's like these women who try to talk about they don't understand why they don't have a man, they're attractive. Yeah, but if you have a nasty attitude, you're not going to be able to keep a man. You can be as good looking as you want. I don't care about how good Colin Kaepernick's arm is. If the NFL owners associate you with a divisive tactic, quote unquote divisive, or distraction technique, of course that's going to lower your chances of being employed. Why wouldn't it? If you go to a job interview and you have a degree in this and a degree in that, but you also have an arrest record, that's going to stop you from being able to get that job, or it's going to hinder the potential for you to get that job. That's common knowledge and common sense. These people don't really care about Colin Kaepernick. He's just a talking point to once again help them promote chaos. And that's all this is about, the promotion and the perpetuation of chaos, so that they can try to instill their own order down the line. Once again, they want to turn the NFL into a woke sports league. And they're using Colin Kaepernick to help bring about that end game. That's the end game of Colin Kaepernick's sponsors. He himself has no end game. He's a buffoon.
But the bottom
jury
line
was
is,
out on that.
the record, the QBR was 43.4 in 2015, 49.5 in 2016. These are not attractive numbers. When you combine that with the fact that you are a distraction, that you are somebody that's a pain in their rear end, because they believe that you are compromising their bottom line. It goes back to what we're talking about with Nike. Business, risk, reward. What are you worth? What are you bringing to the table? And
Thank you, sir. It's about time you started speaking some sense on this issue. Good for you. You're finally getting a backbone.
And I believe that we've gotten so caught up in talking about the protest that we have neglected to point out, excuse me, if I'm an owner, do you know what I can actually say to a judge? Do you really think I need to collude with anybody to make this decision? I just gave you numbers combined with the fact that this man is going to cause me problems.
No, collusion's going to be hard to prove. He's going to have to find an email or an eyewitness or something.
But again, before I give it to you, I'm asking a question, and I'll give it to you. If I'm an owner, you think I can't make the case? Let me get this straight. You're telling me I have to collude with someone to make this call? That's what I'm saying. We don't ask that question, and we need to.
That's sure, but that's not even like the burden of proof is on Kaepernick. He's got to prove it.
Sure.
The owners don't even need to say that.
Let me say this at this point, once again, nothing would surprise me in regards to the collusion case, especially now that he has Nike behind him. Money talks. All right? All the judicial system is a banking system. All judges are bankers. Money talks. Do not be surprised if Colin Kaepernick wins that collusion case now.
That could be their defense, but Kaepernick, his attorneys are going to have to find an email from someone or an eyewitness who said they might, and then there's collusion and absent something.
They might, or they might just find circumstantial evidence and they'll turn it into enough evidence for him to win the case. And if he does win that case, what does that do? That decertifies the NFL collective bargaining agreement, and that will automatically plunge the NFL into chaos.
Something like that. It'll be very difficult to prove collusion.
Right.
But it seems to me, from everything I can gather, does this help or hurt Kaepernick's message? Commercialism reflects social behavior, but it also, as a positive feedback loop, is influenced by social behavior.
Okay.
In other words, the same argument that people are making, and you have made this argument, well, the economic activity of the NFL is reflective of the consumer's tastes, and so if they don't want Kaepernick, then what are you going to do about the NFL owners, right? So does this help or hurt Kaepernick's message? The fact that Nike is now in business with him, of course, helps it. Not only because it amplifies it right now, but it reflects a huge percentage of the population that has supported Kaepernick.
Well, I'm not quite sure if a huge percentage of the population has supported Kaepernick. I would say that's a very verbal, a very overtly expressive portion of the public population has expressed support for Colin Kaepernick. I would not say that it's sizable per se. I mean, it depends on how seriously you take quote-unquote Black Twitter and a lot of the woke Negroes on YouTube and Instagram, etc.
Because now this is being reflected, it will further influence social behavior because it's mainstreaming it further. It will absolutely be good for Kaepernick's message.
Hey guys, did you hear what Mr. Max Kellerman just stated? What he did was he confirmed what I've been telling you for the longest time, which is that Nike is involved in social engineering. Let me rewind it back a little bit.
The argument in Kaepernick, and because now this is being reflected, it will further influence social behavior.
You hear that? He said it will further influence social behavior. In other words, Nike co-signing Colin Kaepernick will make other so-called black people who might have been borderline sympathizers with Kaepernick say, oh, wow, Nike is with Kaepernick, so what he's thinking, what he does, how he lives, what he believes must be correct. Because Nike would not co-sign him unless he was correct.
Because it's mainstreaming it further. It will absolutely be good for Kaepernick's message. The argument, the best argument against it, is that, well, now it's commercialized, right? Like,
I don't think that's the best argument.
But there are many who, I think it is a good message. Wait a minute, Kaepernick, what are we doing here? You're selling out to a brand that has other issues, that, that uses labor overseas and pays them this amount, or what.
Well, Colin Kaepernick is not a deep enough thinker to care about that. At the end of the day, money talks. The same thing with LeBron James. And I stated this in previous videos in regards to LeBron James. He stated point blank, maybe about 12, 13 years ago, that he wanted to have a certain sneaker sent over to China so that they could make it for a couple dollars. He said something along those lines. So, I mean, most of these guys, they're not truly, they don't have the breadth of understanding to speak about social issues and actually mean what they say.
Whatever the case may be.
Okay.
And my point there is, any historical figure, they're all human beings. Look at them up close, you will find warts.
Sure.
You will find flaws.
Of course.
If you examine Kaepernick carefully, you can absolutely criticize him on different levels. But the big picture is this will amplify his message.
I get it. Let me throw this back at you.
If the big picture is that this will amplify his message, well, then what people truly have to concentrate on is his message worth amplifying? And that's the true question for the so-called black man. Once again, this is why my channel is a pro-truth channel geared towards the so-called black man. We have to ask ourselves, why would a multi-billion-dollar corporation want to get in bed with Colin Kaepernick? What do they have to gain? Because if it's not financial, that means that they have an agenda.
And let me get your response to this. A couple of things. Number one, Colin Kaepernick protests. We didn't hear much noise about it. He was protesting for weeks before local and national media picked it up. A matter of fact, one could make the argument none of us gave a damn about it until President Trump spoke out and said fire all those SOBs.
Not quite. Part of what you're saying is correct, Stephen A. Smith, but the media certainly gave a damn about it for a long time. What Trump's comments did was it reinvigorated the fire that was starting to die out. Why did Trump make that statement? Not only to appeal to his constituency, but to put the NFL owners in a position where they would have to make a decision. Trump, being a businessman, he understands that in order for business to run how it's supposed to run, you have to cut off any and all opportunities for there to be any aspects of a business that are not running up to snuff. And if you allowed the Colin Kaepernick storyline to continue through the other players that were kneeling, eventually it was going to hurt the NFL, which is a business. And I've told you, brothers, numerous times that I have no doubt that Donald Trump was communicating with many prominent NFL owners behind the scenes, and he was letting them know, you guys have to bring this narrative to, to some type of closing, to some type of conclusion. Or I'm going to punish you with taxes. And that's why Jerry Jones came out and spoke out against the whole Kaepernick issue. Because Jerry Jones is the #1 capitalist in the NFL. There's no doubt about that. But what one really has to ask oneself, what we have to ask ourselves, once again, is if Marshawn Lynch has been protesting in the same way for years and nobody cared, why all of a sudden did everyone care so much about Colin Kaepernick? There's no doubt in my mind that the reason why people care so much about Kaepernick doing it and not Marshawn Lynch is because Marshawn Lynch does not have the connections, he does not have the sponsors that Kaepernick has. Kaepernick is getting sponsored. There's a hidden hand behind him. And Nike is just one of the many factions that are sponsoring the Kaepernick project who decide to come out to the forefront, come out into the light.
They would,
No, predates that.
It predates that, but the protest predates it. I'm talking about the momentum that swelled. It really hit the fan once President Trump said what he said, because after that, the immediate aftermath of that, we saw Jerry Jones take a knee.
Ding. Jerry Jones took a knee because he was trying to save his business. That's why he did that. He was trying to take a knee because after Donald Trump said what he said, Jerry Jones probably received an influx of emails or some type of correspondence from many of his sponsors that were trying to put the heat on him to make sure that he knew that none of his players better take a knee. When you hear Jerry Jones make these statements about how none of his players better take a knee, you know why he's saying that? Because many of the more affluent associates of the Dallas Cowboys are telling him that his players better not take a knee. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that brothers might not be cognizant of or aware of. It's not all about what you see with your two eyes. There's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes.
On Thursday Night Football, Jerry Jones took a knee because in solidarity with the players. But that's the plus side. Here's the potential minus.
Well, the owners took a knee to show solidarity with their players and also with their fans, but I think that it was that was a very poorly conceived gesture that kind of blew up in their face. That's what that was. They were trying to put out the fire of their black players being upset by what Donald Trump said.
On the side, we have a guy that's been martyred. We have barely heard a word from him since all of this is going down. He's left all the talking to people like me, other athletes, and other sports and beyond.
Stephen A. Smith, why is that? Why haven't more of you guys asked that question? Other than Jason Whitlock, I have not heard any of you guys ask that question about why Colin Kaepernick is so silent. This is a person who supposedly is the representative of a movement, allegedly, but he's been silent. Maybe he's not quite as informed or not quite as good a speaker on these issues as he's trying to act like he is. But one would expect that, seeing as he grew up in a lily white community and he never truly experienced that level of harassment from the police. And I remember there was one incident where there was a female that accused him and a couple of other football players of a sexual assault. And according to the story, he called somebody and said he was scared to death. So he might still be scared to death. He might, he might just be playing a role that he can't get out of. He might be the NFL version of Donnie Brasco. Who the hell knows?
Number one. Number two, there's been division amongst NFL players. You have most of them not taking a knee. You have most of them not protesting.
When you say most, Stephen A. Smith, we're talking about into the 90th percentile. 90 to 95% of the black NFL players are not taking a knee. But once again, you guys in the media choose to concentrate on Colin Kaepernick. That's how you know that Nike's associations with him are not financial. Why would they choose to associate themselves with or affiliate themselves with someone who, for the most part, is not getting any overt form of approval from the constituency, that being so-called black men that he claims to be concerned with? If the average so-called black man is not as concerned with the Colin Kaepernick protest as Colin Kaepernick claims he is, what does Nike have in regards to an investment in this situation other than ideological? It's not financial. Once again, there's going to be an immediate financial boost because all the woke blacks are going to run out and buy Nike apparel, especially for the school year for their children. But after a while, whatever financial boost they had is going to go away. But what this situation is really all about is Nike adding their name to this situation, because they make so much money. Associating with Colin Kaepernick cannot hurt them at all.
You even have Malcolm Jenkins and a players coalition that use that as an opportunity to address some of their concerns. You have that going on. You have rap artists and others who have been active in the communities in terms of meeting, not just with police officials, but with elected officials in order to do real things to provoke change. Colin Kaepernick has been nowhere to be found outside of the courtroom, and that was what just came up. Outside of that, we haven't heard anything from him.
That's not fair, though.
Please.
He can't speak right now because
I said before.
No, but he's not. So maybe he doesn't.
Right, but Colin Kaepernick had plenty of opportunities to speak well before the collusion case went into motion, Molly Karam.
Doesn't feel comfortable as a public orator.
Thank you, Stephen A. Even Stephen A. said before the collusion case.
Okay.
Maybe he doesn't feel comfortable as a public orator. And by the way, early on, I was critical of him when he wore the shirt with Malcolm X and Castro.
That's right.
Because I thought
Well, I stated at the time the reason why he wore the shirt with Malcolm X and Castro is because he's telling you he is a Marxist. Hello? Anybody home? Colin Kaepernick is a Marxist, okay? / Luciferian.
whatever the relationship is and there are reasons to it, you don't wear a shirt lionizing Castro in any way. Not for it. I think he needed to answer for that. It's America, he doesn't have to.
Right.
But the idea that Kaepernick owes the public discourse, debate, explanation from him himself in a live setting, he may not feel comfortable
I
with
have an answer for that for you because it's very important that both of y'all hear this. You've heard me say this before.
Well, let me say this before Stephen A. Smith answers. It's extremely disingenuous for Max Kellerman to claim that Colin Kaepernick does not owe anyone an explanation. But then he's constantly aligning him with people like Muhammad Ali, who always gave explanations. If he's not willing to give an explanation, and I say the same thing about LeBron James. Stop telling me that Colin Kaepernick and LeBron James are the modern day Muhammad Ali. If all these two guys can do is bitch like women on their menstrual, but when they're asked to substantiate what they're actually about, they can't do it. There's no problem then, nigga, then shut the hell up. Because if you're not a leader, no problem, but then you have to be quiet.
Before. And this is not casting any aspersions on anybody. I'm just giving you the real. White folks come to work with a job to do every day. Black folks come with a responsibility. Here's what I mean by that. Stephen A. Smith is on national television. We're doing a sports show. When Trayvon Martin went down, you gotta say something. You gotta say something. When Eric Gardner went down, you gotta say something.
Well, you know what, Stephen A. Smith? That's when you have to tell a lot of these dudes to kick rocks. Because a lot of so-called woke blacks, they'll claim that you have to say something. What they really mean is that you have to bitch and complain on TV. That's when you have to tell a lot of people, you know what? We have to put ourselves and our children in position so that they don't end up like these people. And we have to understand that our end game might not come in our lifetime. The so-called black man does a very poor job of planning things out. And a lot of people might not like me saying that. A lot of brothers might not like me saying that. It is what it is. We have to understand that if we were to lay out an end game for where we want our community to go, so-called community, it might not come into fruition in our lifetime. We just can't keep bitching and complaining to the so-called white man whenever a young black male gets shot down. We've been doing the same thing for decades and decades and decades. And that's one of my pet peeves with the so-called woke blacks. You claim that the white man is terrible and he's this and he's that and he's the devil and he's a cracker and all this other stuff. But then you say you want to be equal to him. Well, there are no two things equal in the universe other than something to itself. So if you want to be equal to the white man, that means that you want to be him. So how could you claim that he has all these negative attributes, but you want to be him? That's why I say the real issue is the mentality of our people. We have to totally separate ourselves mentally from wanting to be this other person, holding the so-called white man and white woman up as paragons of virtue. That's the main problem. That's why people get so emotional about these issues. As long as you're emotional, you can never solve your problem. As long as you approach it emotionally, they will never be resolved. Once again, as long as you approach all of your problems from an emotional perspective, you will never ever be able to solve your problems.
When Walter Scott happened in South Carolina and got shot in the back 8 times, Stephen A., you got to say something. What I'm saying to you is this. Because there's a paucity or a scarcity of voices over the national airwaves, black...
Let me say this. That's not an excuse anymore, so-called black man. We have social media now. We have the ability to get our messages out now in a way that we never, ever had before. This nonsense about how black issues are not talked about on television, fuck television. That's why we have the internet. We have social media. We have YouTube. We have all these things now. So this nonsense about how we have no forums to discuss our issues is just not true. The real issue is that we have a problem understanding how to connect with one another because there's no cultural affinity. That's the main problem. So once the so-called black man returns back to the Most High and regains the understanding of who he's supposed to be, all these problems that afflict us are going to fall by the wayside, almost automatically.
Black folks who are in a position of influence are constantly called upon to step out of their lane, and step up and address issues.
Are you talking about external social pressure to do it? Because I feel internal. I feel internal motivation to talk about.
No, but I'm not talking about.
Yes, that's called Caucasian white Jew guilt, and that's what you try to promote to other people of your ilk. And in the process of you doing that, you try to instill and install within the mind of the so-called black man what he should think. Is basically just a contorted aspect of the quote-unquote white man's burden. And I've touched on this sentiment before on this channel in regards to people like Max Kellerman. People like him are not your friend. They're trying to make you believe that he knows what's best for you. That's why he states he has an internal motivation to do it. Yes, he has the spirit of Satan on him. That's what he means by internal motivation. He has the spirit of Satan on him to try to influence so-called black people to feel and think a certain way.
I'm talking about what we have to do, because I'm getting to Kaepernick. What I'm saying to you is Kaepernick, knowing that because he comes from that, has to understand that. And so when you're quiet, that's a problem when other people are putting themselves on the line, speaking up on your behalf when we haven't even heard from you.
Maybe he felt like it was...
Well, you know what, Stephen A. Smith? I think that one of the main problems is that the people around him are not telling him that he has to speak out about things. I think that a lot of woke Negroes are making a lot of excuses for Colin Kaepernick. They're making him believe that he can do no wrong. Why is that? Because So many so-called black men have the tendency to try to idolize other men and put them on a pedestal. Why is that? Because they're not being trained in the home properly to understand that you don't idolize another man. You're not supposed to put a man on a pedestal. You can appreciate a man for his gifts and for his upper level characteristics or attributes. But to idolize him, no, you're not supposed to do that at all. And that's an issue with a lot of so-called black men. People in general, but once again, I concentrate on the so-called black man. Well, people in general like to idolize other people. And that's a major problem. That's why I state this is not a fanboy channel. All right? But he's not getting enough encouragement from the people around him to speak up. Why is that? Because most likely anyone who tells him to do something that he's not been commanded to do or programmed to do are cut off and shut out.
I think it was more powerful. He said his message through protesting. And that was...
But what I'm saying to you, Molly, is this. It could be me. You might be right. You might be right. But the point is, if we're not hearing from you, publicly or privately, because I know of people who have reached out to Colin Kaepernick, who have looked to go to Capitol Hill.
Let's look at the facts. Let's go back and look at the facts.
Sure.
Hang on a second.
Sure.
From the beginning, it was a silent, peaceful protest.
That's true.
He did not try to call attention to it.
Max Kellerman, I have news for you. You continuously try to use this excuse that Colin Kaepernick was treated unjustly because he was engaging in a quote-unquote silent, peaceful protest. Well, let me say this, and any brother who works in corporate America will know this. If you were to go to your job and right before your shift, you were to get down on both knees and say, I'm protesting racism in the so-called black community, after a while, your supervisor or your manager will call you in the office and they would say, that's not what we hired you for. It's called real life, Max Kellerman. You should experience it with the rest of us someday or sometime. But you know what? I have a feeling that the new CEO of ESPN is going to be having a conversation with Max Kellerman relatively soon.
Someone in the media early on, after a week or two, noticed, hey, Kaepernick is sitting down during the national anthem.
Okay.
People started asking him about it.
Okay.
He never made some bold proclamation. He didn't approach this as Muhammad Ali approached
that's
socialism.
true, but he is on a National Football League field doing what he was doing, Matt.
Stephen A.
Thank you, sir. Stephen A. Smith is finally talking some sense. And he's finally standing up to the woke Caucasian Jew liberal Max Kellerman. Good job.
Stephen A. He wanted to meet with NFLs and NFL owners. Remember the divide with the Players Coalition? He did try to speak there. There was some division, as you...
Supposedly, Colin Kaepernick tried to speak with the NFL Players Coalition, but according to more than one NFL player, they reached out to him and were unable to reach him. According to more than one player, Kaepernick had no interest in speaking directly with the owners.
Yes, division, yes.
So he was trying, Malcolm Jenkins, trying to make those things happen. I think he just didn't have the right avenue to do so.
Okay, and I'm saying
and now he can't.
And I'm saying to y'all, I've spoken to many people. And in fairness to Colin Kaepernick, there's a divide. There are people that say exactly what you have said. There are others that said he's had ample opportunity to speak to us privately, if not publicly, about these issues, and he has passed. They have said that, and they felt...
Because he has no answers. Why wouldn't he pass? If all you're doing is trying to engage in a series of gestures, that's all activism is, how much depth are you going to have? You have no answers. That's why, once again, so-called black man, we have to return to the mentality of an administrator. We have to become accustomed to leadership and thinking things out 5-6 steps ahead so that you have answers for people. The main person that you have to have answers for is yourself, and then your immediate family, and then so on and so forth.
Felt like he's left them hanging.
Here's
the
what
point
I
is, it's worth discussing.
The point is, Nike feels that there's money to be made with Colin Kaepernick.
That's right.
No, they do not. Nike understands that they have to keep the Colin Kaepernick narrative going. I guarantee you, when they sat down around the boardroom table, the last thing that they were concerned with was how much money they were going to make from Colin Kaepernick or with Colin Kaepernick. What they were considering is, how are we going to make sure that we keep his name out there? Because we're going to engineer the NFL one way or the other.
That's right. Because he resonates
with
an enormous percent part of the youth population.
And I agree with them.
And I do think it's going to help Nike.
What enormous percent of the youth population does Kaepernick really resonate with? Please let me know. Other than on Twitter. And, to be quite frank with you, a lot of young so-called black men who've never been taught anything, never been taught how to think properly.
Nike, and I do think it'll help Colin Kaepernick, and I agree with you where you're hijacking it and the message was a little bit late.
Yes.
If it was really genuine, it could have came a little bit earlier. They also had a strong...
It's not about how genuine the message from Nike is. It's about them making sure that their asset is able to accomplish its mission. Once again, brothers, all Nike is a farm for MK assets, monarch athletes. LeBron James, Tiger Woods, Serena Williams, now Colin Kaepernick. That's all it's about, man. It's corporate warfare on the minds of the people, particularly the so-called black man. And that's who my channel concentrates on, because the so-called black man is the recipient of the most lies.
Strong statement I want to mention too, with the French Open, when Serena Williams was banned with that cat suit, they came out strong supporting her.
Yes.
Because I was disgusted by that situation as well.
Who cares what you were disgusted by? When people go to the French Open, they want to see a tennis match. They don't want to see a striptease. They don't need to see Serena Williams and all her body parts jiggling every fucking where. All right? But that's a whole other video. I already covered that issue. But a lot of these broads, they're so ridiculous. They want to be able to dress and do whatever they want. That's not the real world. That's not real life. All right? There have to be restrictions placed and moderations placed on society so that we have a civilized environment. That's what it's about. Serena Williams is nothing but another agent of chaos. But once again, why did Nike step out to defend her? Because she's one of their assets. That's the point.
As well, so.
There's money to be made in social justice for Nike.
Yeah, just do it.
And
All right,
they will do
guys.
it.
We'll leave it there.
Yeah, just leave it there. As they ended with, just do it, a.k.a. do what thou wilt. Brothers, that is where that Nike credo comes from. That's just an alteration of what Aleister Crowley stated. All right?